Hi, Sarah. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing, Rebecca?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad that we get to speak again. Another one for the podcast, right?
I know I've missed chatting with you.
Yeah. So I think today we really wanted to, after leaving off of our other podcast, we really wanted to talk about genetics. Because we kind of covered that a bit and touched on it in our last podcast, and I'd really like to kind of talk about all the different factors, all the different breeds, and what to expect in a sort of succinct way. So why don't you get us running and let's talk a little bit about how genetics affect dogs and what that actually means.
I'm going to try to kind of like summarize sort of like what we talked about in the last one.
Mm-hmm.
The last episode, we kind of touched on this and the idea that it's not all how you raise them. Like genetics are a big factor for dogs. And it like your dog's genetics will not necessarily explain their entire personality, especially when we're looking at like breed genetics. Breed genetics are not going to explain the entire dog's personality, but the personality of their parents and that bloodline, especially if it's a purebred dog, will be inherited. So the bloodline and the breeding itself is more important for individual temperament and personality. But as we sort of touched on, humans have selected dog breeds to do specific jobs for a really long time. And so how that was kind of done is people were like, well, I like that this dog does this well, and I like that this dog does this well. So they're going to have puppies, and hopefully those puppies do this thing extra well. And so dogs were selected for companionship. They were selected for guarding. They were selected for other jobs like herding and killing vermin. And so all of those traits that we have selected for are still very much alive and well in dogs today. However, the majority of dogs are no longer in working roles, and that's been a relatively recent change. That presents a problem for a lot of people who just want a calm and reserved pet when they've gotten the Malinois. Because the Malinois' genetic programming is not to be calm and reserved, it is to do. Heavy, heavy looking.
Do, put everything in its mouth.
Yes.
Grab everything, hold everything.
So we wanted to spend some time talking about how genetics influence a dog's behavior and like what some of the breed specific traits are that are commonly known and like issues that you might have with a dog of a certain breed and kind of like what you can do to fulfill those needs that will make your training and behavior modification journey a lot more smooth.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I know for me, like I work with a lot of mixed breeds being in a larger city, but now that I've moved up to Portland, I also work with a lot of like gun dogs, hunting dogs, that kind of thing. Why don't we just kind of very briefly go over like all the different types of classes of breed, I guess.
So before we talk about that, I did want to explain what the predatory sequence is in dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because that is really like what humans have selected and modified to kind of make the different breeds. So
yeah, so like your herding dog it's a predatory sequence. It's just cut off at a certain point. Yeah.
Think some are heightened, some are downplayed, right? So it's and some parts of the prey sequence in certain breeds we just don't want at all. So it's really important to understand like what predatory behavior is in dogs. Dogs were bred from, other wild canines. We think mostly wolves. And wolves are predators. Like we know that, we understand that wolves live in the wild. They hunt and kill to live. And what a lot of people don't really understand is all of our dogs to some degree will have retained some of that predatory behavior. And like a lot of dog behavior that they do, and sometimes things that we find nuisance behavior is related to that prey drive. So like even your dog, like the dog that is incessantly sniffing, that's part of the prey sequence. Dogs that destroy stuffed animals, that's part of the prey sequence, right?
Yes.
Dogs that like to chase cars, that's predatory behavior. So the predatory sequence in its entirety, and most of our domestic dogs are not going to display an intact prey sequence, and we'll talk about that more when we kind of get into the groups, but some do.
Yes.
And those dogs often get mislabeled as aggressive. So predatory sequence in entirety, and I'm probably gonna miss some because I'm just going off of memory, and we can't rely on that. But it is searching, so that's kind of like really that hunting for the prey, orienting. So when they find the prey or they pick up the scent or they have a visual on the prey, um, we'll talk about this in some breeds. There is an addition of barking, which is not found really in wild canine prey drive because they don't want the prey to know that they're there. Uh,
Right, right.
then we go into stalking and then chasing. And then if they can catch the prey, it's grab bite and then kill bite, which is the shaking the head. You know, when your dog takes
Kill shake. Yeah.
and
Okay.
they shake it,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
predatory behavior. That's breaking a rabbit's neck. Um, gonna get a little gross, okay? You're gonna have to bear with me. And then the next phase is actually dissect. Okay, so taking the poor animal apart so that they
Yep.
can consume, which is
Yep.
eating, which is the end goal of predatory behavior in a wild animal.
Yes.
Okay, not Disney dogs. We are no longer
No,
in
not a
Disney dogs.
Disney dog.
Dogs are predators. They have predatory behavior. They do disgusting things that are often related to predatory behavior. Okay,
Yes.
now that I got that out, and I think I actually remembered all of the parts, so I'm very
I know you did. You did. That's good, and it's good to like put that out there and remind people of that because these are natural dog behaviors,
they are
and
natural
it
dog
does.
behaviors.
Yeah, it is normal. And it is important to know that it's normal. Your dog is not evil. Your dog is not, you know, outlandishly wild for behaving in interacting in this way with the world. So, however, that being said, this also leads into like us talking about the different classes because, like Sarah said at the beginning, it's some of these traits are upplayed and kept, and some of them are downplayed. So, like, your herding dog isn't going to complete the full sequence. Your hound dog isn't going to complete the full sequence. Even your terrier isn't going to potentially complete the full sequence, depending on what terrier you have.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
We're gonna talk
And
about what they have.
yeah, exactly. So it's just really important to know that that is all normal and natural and it's part of it. So with that said, let's talk about the different classes of dogs.
Yes. So one of the things that we did want to mention, because we want to give credit where credit is due, is these categories come from Kim Brophy. And if you want to read more about them, she has a wonderful book called Meet Your Dog. And it is perfectly geared for pet owners. It's not super sciencey. It's really great. It's one of my favorite books in my dog training library. And Kim
Oh, same.
also
And
has
it's also available as an audiobook.
as an audiobook. You can get it off of Amazon. And she also has a really great course called the Legs course. And the Legs philosophy is linked to family dog mediation. I'm actually a certified licensed family dog mediator. And so what family dog mediators and Legs is all about, I don't want to go too much into this, but basically is like, hey, here's your dog and here's your unique dog. And Legs is learning, environment, genetics, and self. So figuring out like what your dog's unique legs are and where like how do those parts of that dog kind of like make their behavior. And
Yep.
then working with the dog that you have to kind of like meet their needs and kind of resolve behavior problems from a real like grassroots perspective. So I'm a big,
Oh, yeah.
but I definitely would
Same.
recommend
Same.
Kim's book. Oh, another thing that Kim has that's kind of neat. If you have a mixed breed dog and you're not sure of like what their lineage is, and like maybe you can't afford a DNA test yet, if you go on her website, she has something called the dog key, and you can kind of put in like some key traits about your dogs, and it will kind of tell you like what group your dog might fall into. It's not a
Oh, that's
DNA
cool. I didn't
test,
know
but
that that
like,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
based off of physical traits like ears, tail, size,
Okay.
she'll kind of tell you like your dog is a sighthound, right? Or it could
Right.
be like
So
could
basically,
be
what we do is what rescues and shelters and dog trainers do when we don't have the DNA test. We go, well, looks
yeah,
like they have Sharpei ears.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
not. You know, a lot of rescues are like this dog is black and tan, so it's a shepherd mix. But we know that
Yeah.
it's hard to base genetics off of
Yeah.
phenotype. So this is a lot more general. Where like instead of
Yep.
picking a breed, it's like your dog might be a primitive dog, right?
Got it.
So it'll kind of give you an idea of like what their like what ethology group they might fall into. So the other thing to understand is these groups are based off of behavior and ethology and development. So they are not based off of like the American Kennel Club's idea of how dogs are split.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So I would like to start with natural or primitive breeds. Primitive breeds are really interesting. They are kind of like dog breeds that are the least domesticated. They've been around the longest, so they've kind of been humans' companions for the longest amount of time, but they have had the least amount of change to their natural DNA. So primitive dogs will often have an intact prey sequence. So this is the one group of dog where you actually will see that they can be known to like hunt and kill small animals. Um, Behavior problem in the group, but a very natural, normal behavior. But that is kind of a known issue that will come up, something that you may have to deal with if you have a natural or a primitive breed.
Right.
Some of the breeds that I would say are like more common would be Siberian Huskies, Alaskan Malamutes. I keep thinking Basenjis, like Basenjis keep coming to mind. I think Chow Chows would be like a primitive breed.
Yeah, I
Basically,
think
all of the Spits, and then like most of our Asian breeds are going
yes,
to
I was
be
about to
kind
say
of
the Asian
primitive.
breeds. Yeah, your Tibetan Mastiff, your Shiba Inus, your other class of I forget what the breeds are, but
Yep.
they look like Shibas, but they're not Shibas. Those are all going to be
And so, like, some things to be aware of with this breed group of dogs is they have not been selectively bred to listen to people for no good reason.
yeah
If you want them to respond to you, there has to be something in it for them. You have to build a relationship with these
yes
dogs. So you have to, build social currency. If they feel like you have good ideas and you're worth listening to, they will respond to you. But they also are going to respond really well to like external rewards. So if they like food rewards, they might eagerly work for those. But if they don't want what you have, there's no bribing them, there's no coercing them. They're not going to do it just because you want them to.
yeah
But if you can put in the time and like really build a trusting relationship, they're phenomenal. Some of the
yeah
issues that
no
you're
the,
going to see is like running off. They can be standoffish with strangers, and they can
yes
have a high level of body autonomy. So what that means is they may struggle with like veterinary exams or being like interacting and being handled by strangers. Can
yeah
you think of
or
anything
even
else?
yeah, they also will often struggle with like being confined.
Mm-hmm.
So dogs like Tibetan Mastiffs and
Yes,
Great
confinement
Pyrenees.
is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, being confined, because you have to remember that these dogs are bred to think independently. Yeah, you're right. Like it has to be worth their time, and if they think you have good ideas, they'll follow along. But these are dogs that are bred to go independently from the handler and go do their job, which
And if,
is usually
yeah.
some kind of hunting or guarding.
And
So
if you want an independent dog, they're going to be a great choice for you. Just be aware that you don't get an independent dog and a dog who's going to jump every time you step. Right?
exactly. So, so we kind of already touched on guardian dogs too. That is of its own sort of class, but it can also go into some of the primitive breeds. Let's talk about some of the other ones like sight hounds, toy dogs, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind. I would like to talk a little bit more about guardian dogs because I think they
Yeah,
get
let's do
pretty
it.
misunderstood too. But let's do
Yes.
sighthounds.
Okay.
We'll go down the list. So
Yeah, we'll go down our list.
yeah, sighthounds are again very primitive, very very primitive ancient breeds. They were bred for hunting, and they were bred for hunting primarily. They track prey by sight. So you'll see a lot of these dogs like in Middle Eastern countries where they have big expanses of land so they can see the rabbit like running way off
Yep.
in the distance. And they are very, very, very fast. So these are going to be like
Very fast.
greyhounds, our whippets, our salukis, and there's a
Our
whole bunch of other
borzois.
amazing
Yeah.
breeds that I cannot pronounce. Deerhounds would be a sighthound, right? A
Deerhounds.
larger,
Yep.
kind of slower sighthound, but they are like a staghound.
Yep.
And so they love to run. They're very fast. That
And
can
they are
definitely,
extremely visually
yeah,
stimulated.
visually stimulated. They love to run, so that can be an issue. That can be an issue with people. So like them running off. But the plus side of sighthounds is they're very sensitive, they're very sweet, and they have an excellent off switch. So they're just as happy to like chill at home for hours and as are
Yes.
to go hiking with you.
Yep.
They can
That is
also,
true.
because of their sensitivity, sometimes they can struggle with like handling from strangers as
Yeah, they
well.
can also, depending on how it's introduced and genetic lines, that's, par for the course, but they can also struggle with living with smaller animals like cats and chihuahuas and things that might act like prey or move very
Yeah.
flighty.
And like anything that invades their space suddenly can be a problem for them because they're very
Yeah.
sensitive about their bodies.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Let's talk on guardian dogs since that's the next one on our list.
Again, like pretty ancient. So there's kind of two types of guardian dogs. Like I almost would like to split them into dogs that were like the livestock guardian dogs because their genetic
Hmm.
selection is very different, and dogs that were sort
I
of
agree.
selected to protect like property and people, right?
Yes.
So our livestock guardian dogs, like they are amazing dogs. If you like how they are bred is they are bred to actually live with the livestock that they are protecting, and they will lay around 99% of the time, but when as soon as they detect a threat they spring into action. So their
100%.
job,
Yeah.
yeah, their job is really to live with the sheep, be gentle with the sheep. Oh, you know what we forgot to talk about, and I don't know why I said only sheep because it's not just sheep. With the sighthounds with the prey drive, they have a heightened search, or so the search and orient, and
Hmm.
then chase,
Yes.
and then they will grab bite, but they don't go any further than that because they'll
Yeah.
destroy the prey for the hunter. So yeah,
Yep.
heightened search. They don't stop; they go right to chase. So search,
Yep.
orient, and then actually, I don't even think they do much searching because they tend to just like do a bit of an eye stalk. They orient and they go right to chase, and then they do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like a quick scan. Oh, that moved. Going.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they would might like frisbee, or chasing a ball, but they might
Or
not
flirt
really
pole.
like tug, right? Because they're like, oh,
Yeah.
why would I do that?
Ew.
My genes tell me not to do that, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, sorry. Back to guardian dogs. So livestock guardian dogs, their prey drive is like nil. So that whole predatory sequence has been selected to be very minimal because you can't have a dog living with prey that
Yeah.
has prey drive. But they do have like heightened territory. So they're very territorial and they're very protective of their family group. So basically, you raise them with the animals and they kind of defend them as family. And they're very brave and they will go right into defensive aggression very quickly
Yep.
to ward off threats.
Yep.
So some of the issues that people can have with these dogs because they bark to alert to and ward off predatory animals is barking, right? Territorial
Yeah.
barking. If they are not well contained, they can wander. And I think like struggling with guests entering the home and the yard can be a big problem.
It's very, very common one. Strange dogs or strange people.
Yeah, and they're again kind of like our primitive breeds. They're like super friendly to their family, lovely family dogs, very chill, like generally not going to be aggressive, great with children, very tolerant of handling. But they're not going to do what you tell them to just because you told them to do it. So another breed that you have
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
really build up social currency because they have really low prey drive. It's often hard to motivate them with like traditional reward based training because they're like, I don't care about the treat, I don't care about tug, right? Like that's not important.
Exactly.
So you have
Yeah.
to really build that relationship and kind of use body language and communication with them.
Way more so than some other breeds for sure. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Like if you're putting your Great Pyrenees inside of an apartment, like you're gonna struggle a little bit, and you have to expect that. So
Right. And like what's really nice with them is they are lazy. They are lazy and they are
oh yeah, nothing.
yeah.
If nothing's going on, they are just chill as heck. Yeah.
And then I guess our other guardian dogs are kind of the ones that people sort of tailor to protect us and our stuff. So a lot of our mastiffs are going to fall in that category. Like a lot of countries around the world have their version of the mastiff, like a Cane
Yes.
Corso. Rottweilers are a mastiff. Neapolitan mastiffs, bull
Floribel.
mastiffs. Rhodesian Ridgebacks are
Yeah,
guard
kind
dog
of.
sighthound. But
Yeah.
sometimes
Well,
they
they're bred
kind of like,
for
sometimes there's like a mashup too.
a mesh up, yeah, because they're also bred for hunting lions. So a little bit of sight
Yes.
hound, a little bit of guard.
Yeah.
Borbals are really common in other parts of the world for guarding property and stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the more common ones for the U.S. that are also, all around dogs that we're going to get into another category like German Shepherds. Most people would think of a German Shepherd as a guard dog in a capacity.
Right.
So,
So these dogs are they have to be well socialized to people from a young age and exposed to things from a young age. Sorry.
yes.
So that they
Basically,
understand.
anything that is going to be in your life has to be normalized at a young age.
So
Like,
that
this is
they
not that
understand
normal.
this is normal, this is not a threat, because otherwise they are going to default to sudden environmental change on my property is a threat, and I'm going to respond to that with aggressive displays. And
Exactly.
um, why must we do this right now, kitten? He's like, I'm woke up. I'm going to mess with things. So
Yeah.
you're distracting me, but you're really cute. Oh well, whatever. If he messes with my lighting, no one's gonna care. So some issues that people will have is like leash reactivity, and in general, like responding to people approaching.
Yep.
If the dog is well socialized from a young age, then they usually understand that people outside in their environment is normal. But if
Yeah.
sometimes they kind of are like, well, I'm going to protect my owner, right? So resource guarding can
Yeah.
be an issue. Resource guarding can be an
They're
issue in the livestock guarding
Oh,
as
100%.
well.
Yes.
Um, with guard dogs, definitely like people entering the home is like a huge thing. And they tend to be strong, powerful dogs. So for inexperienced dog owners, they can really struggle with that kind of like idea of determining things that are threats that are not threats.
Yeah.
I do a lot of, again, they do need to be socialized and trained from an early age and continue on with that. One of my personal dogs is quite territorial. So I do a lot of like modified introductions into the home, especially as she was a young dog. I go outside, I meet people, we come in together so that she understands that I'm bringing them in. And then once she's properly introduced, she's fine. She's fine with people off property. But if you don't set that up and you don't advocate for your dog and kind of set things up for your dog so that they are going to be successful, that can be a real problem. A lot of people will also struggle with like dogs kind of being aggressive around the property. And sometimes like
Yes.
going out where you patrol with them, where like they're on the inside and you're on the outside, can really be helpful. So there's a lot of techniques that I don't think we have a lot of time to get into, but maybe we could
Oh,
do an
definitely not.
episode on
In
that.
fact, I think we're probably going to have this is probably going to be part one of two
Yeah, I
parts of
feel like we're
genetics.
going
Yeah.
into this. We could do an episode too on like territorial behavior, because I don't
I think we will. I think we will.
that's
Yeah.
talked about enough. But yeah, those are definitely probably going to be the biggest issues. Accepting touch from strangers is another thing, because they're kind of bred like trust. But if you gain their trust, then they are lovely, and again, very good with their family, and they're good with
Yeah.
their immediate circle.
I always call it once you get into the club. Once you're in the club, you're in the club with those kind of dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes they need like gradual introduction and then they're cool, and that's totally normal for those dogs. But they're not going to be like the golden retriever who is so happy when the mailman comes.
No.
Because he
Yeah,
is.
they definitely won't be. Yes.
Do we have time to go into a few more?
I think we might have time for one more. Let's touch on toy dogs, just
Okay.
because I think that's one that's like
Toy dogs,
pretty
I
common.
feel like they don't get the recognition that they deserve. So
Yes.
toy dogs are all our little ankle biters, right? So toy
Yes.
dogs were bred primarily for companionship. And so what's really interesting with toy dogs is they're basically like miniature versions of dogs from all the other groups. So like
Yep.
you could have a Yorkshire Terrier that's a toy breed, but he's going to have the terrier tendencies of prey drive.
Yep.
You could have a Pomeranian who's a toy breed, but he's also going to have the tendencies of the natural primitive dogs.
Exactly.
Some of the common things with toy breeds is they were bred for companionship, so they can have issues with separation, separation from their owner and guarding the owner and barking.
Yeah, I was going to say resource guarding is a really common thing with toy breeds.
A lot of them were bred to alert bark or prevent people from getting close to the owner, like as a historical, that was something that was very desired and no longer is. So you'll see those kinds of issues a lot. Another thing is aggression with handling. And I did bring up that I wanted to talk about toy breeds a little bit because I think what happens a lot with toy breeds is because they're small, we just think that we can manhandle them. And they develop almost a defensive aggression because people don't treat them like a bigger dog. And they just are like, well, you're small, so I'm going to make you handle it. And so they develop a lot of kind of defensive handling aggression. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's also like there's a whole like thing about small dog syndrome, which is like partially defensive handling aggression that people create by not handling them kindly and respectfully, but also because they're so small, it's so easy just to be like, well, just sit on my lap, right?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
don't get a lot of the teaching and the boundaries and the education.
Yeah, they don't really get, like, most people are just like, oh, you can't cause any damage, so
Right.
therefore, like, I'm just going to make you do this. So they end up ignoring a lot of the natural body language that dogs throw off, and then it escalates really fast because it's easier to ignore it in a small dog.
Yeah.
Just because it was bred to be a toy dog doesn't necessarily mean that it was bred to be a lap dog,
Yeah.
so those are things that are two very different things.
Yeah. Like I
Like you
feel
said,
bad for
Yorkshire
a lot
Terriers
of
can have terrier tendencies, so.
Chihuahuas are spicy little guys, but people get them because they want to, a little baby to dress up, and they don't deal with that too well sometimes. They're
No,
like,
they don't. No, they don't.
it's me.
And it is important to
Respect
respect that. I
me.
feel like we can, exactly. Um, we could definitely, I think we'll probably pick it up at Toy Dogs again next time, just to kind of touch about, because I think the history of toy dogs is kind of interesting, and I would be remiss in talking about like the Pekingese. The Pekingese was kind of like bred to go in tandem with the Tibetan Mastiff. Like, so it is kind of interesting. And we've got gun dogs and terriers and bulldogs and all of that to talk about as well. With that being said, we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 on this. Is there anything in terms of the natural primitive sighthound, guardian dogs, toy dogs that we've talked about that you just want to kind of like wrap up on real quick?
I think I covered everything that I wanted to. Again, if I think of anything at 2 a.m., I will put it in our show notes for part two.
100%. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. We're definitely also going to do a show on surrogate activities. We're talking about these breed
Yes.
classes, and we've talked about how genetics affects behavior. We are definitely going to talk about activities that we can do with these types of dogs that will help them navigate the world of our modern society, of your backyard rural farm that's fenced into downtown New York City. It is important to meet those needs, so we're going to do a special episode on that as well. How can they get in touch with you, Sarah?
Well, I am currently running my business out of Trail, British Columbia. I'm in the West Kootenays. It's in Southeast BC. It's a pretty small town, but if you don't live in my area, I do offer online lessons and online group classes. The best way to get a hold of me is through my business, which is Parks and Recreation Services, and our website kind of has everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram and everything as well, but our website is www.bnrbc.ca. The kitten woke up and now he's getting the dogs to play with them, and it's really cute.
I love it. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. You can also do online lessons with me if you're not in the area. I do private sessions for the Portland and surrounding area. You can reach me at dognamics.com, DOGNAMICS. I want to plug Kim Brophy's book one more time, also available as an audiobook. We're going to talk about that again as a part of our introduction for the part 2 of this. We'll put everything in the show notes. If you like what you're listening to, please feel free to subscribe, share, tell your friends about it. And if you have questions, comments, or want us to maybe speak on a particular subject in the future, you can also reach out to us at getyoursittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. And we look forward to talking to you next time.